Okay.
Yeah.
What does the teacher do?
They 1, 2, 3 eyes on me.
Okay. 1, 2, 3 eyes on me.
I'm gonna clear set.
Oh yeah, hold on. We're gonna let Chelsey put her stuff away.
Oh, that's my stuff she's putting away.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Women helping women.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're so excited to have Chelsey Goodan here today.
Woo!
And yay, Zibby's Bookshop. She has been working with girls for 16 years as a tutor, a mentor, an activist for teenage girls and giving them voice. And this book, according to Oprah Daily, if you have a teenage girl in your life, you need to read it. So I feel like I don't need to say anything else about her. And thank you, Morgan, for being here. Also, Morgan Walsh is an actress and the co-founder of an amazing organization that I feel like some of the Archer girls would be very into, that brings LGBTQ plus books into public school libraries.
Yep.
So Archer should know about it, and so should all of you. And Mia Alpert's not here yet, but I just want to thank Archer also for being a part of this event, spreading the word, empowering girls. Let's go.
Yay. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Archer moms and ladies from beyond. So happy that you're here, and so happy to talk to Chelsey Goodan about her book, Underestimated: The Wisdom and Power of Teenage Girls. This book, I mean, raise your hand if you're a caregiver or a mom in this room. Yeah. Right? And the thing I particularly love about your perspective is that you are a tutor, right? You've been tutoring for years. You're not a mom. And that is good for this. I really want to hear, was there a moment for you where you were like, I need to write this book?
Yeah, well, and I'm going to call that out, right? Like, I'm not a mom, and so I'm not here to be like, I know exactly how you should be a mom. Like, I've never tried to claim I'm like a parenting expert or anything along those lines. What has happened is that I have been invited into a very rare space of trust. As we know, teenage girls tend to have the walls up. They shut you out. They say one word answers to things. And what happened for me was I would have hours upon hours and quality time upon quality time where we go hiking and talk about all of life. And I realized how rare, how much they were telling me about their life, about their worries, about their doubts, their concerns, and that they weren't telling anyone else in their entire life. And I had all these secrets, if you will, to help them to like, so I've always said my goal is to be the girls' microphone, their portal for what they want to say to the world. Like, I am their advocate and trying to amplify their voice and translate it to an adult audience so that adults like can better understand them, can better connect to them, better empower them. And we can also in turn create a better world that allows them to step into their full power, their full voice. And that was the intention behind it. And then within that, what happened is a lot of certain parenting techniques got mixed in. And so it's never that I'm trying to like say, well, this is how you should do it. The whole book is actually saying all the shoulds. We could do a lot less shoulds in the world, you know, and that's what teenage girls feel, right? They feel like they should look like this and they should act like that. And so do moms. And so do we all. And they feel, teenage girls feel really judged by the world. And I think we all feel judged. So the key is actually the wisdom that they taught me is for everyone, all types of people. And I think that was the other thing. I learned more from them than I ever taught. And that was what I wanted to share with the world too. Like, if we listen to these girls, they have incredible solutions for our problems. And that was another big thing I wanted to contribute to the world.
Yeah, well, you really did. And I can't recommend the audiobook enough. I'm an ear reader. I love listening to an author read their book. And I've been able to listen to your book in the car with my daughter. So I'm a mom too. I have 3 kids. And my youngest is 12. She'll be 13 soon. And I did this thing where we had a long trip back from Arrowhead. And I put Chelsey's book on and I said, you know, my friend wrote this book and I just found out like it's about teenagers. And I'm wondering what you think. Will you help me listen to this and tell me what you think? She was in. The second you start talking, she's in. So I will say that this book really can be for your kids too. And what I found is unsolicited stories started to come out. So Cece would say, pause it. And then she would tell me a story. And there were things that I really needed to know, you know, that as a parent, I'm so grateful to know about how an interaction she had with the teacher, you know, how she felt around the pressure of a test, perfectionism, or friend drama. Those one-word answers you said, they happen to parents too a lot.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that there's been a lot of, I'm hearing now from, women across the country, and a lot of moms are reading it with their teenage daughter, which is not something I necessarily planned or expected. And it's exactly what you're talking about, where they have a context now to reference, to have deeper conversations with them about really difficult topics to bring up. And then the girl feels really safe to bring them up because the book actually serves as kind of ground rules of being like, well, hey mom, Chelsey said to like listen and not jump in with your solution right away. Like the girl can like feel, because she knows I have her back. So there's actually been a lot of big moments where I've been vetted by teenage girls. It's not just your daughter. I can't even begin to tell you how many teenage girls have vetted this book. They were very involved, by the way, in writing it. And I think girls can feel that right away. But I want to do right by them, and they can feel that intention by it. And when I have a teenage girl at a book event that I don't know, I always be lying over and I'm like, what'd you think? I was on the plane with a teenage girl and I was like showing her my video of being on Hoda and Jen on the Today Show. And I was like, do you like my point there? Am I right? It's like, I'm always checking in with the girls and then calling them all the time and making sure that I am accurately saying what they want to say. But in order for the opportunity to create space for a mom and daughter or a parent, also dads love the book. It's a very easy, accessible read in a way that there's fun to it. And I had a really good relationship with my dad, and the dad stories are really, people love it. And I think dads can feel that kind of healthy fatherhood, masculinity narrative in the book as well.
Well, you refer to how important it is, right? For how important it is to have a dad who is witnessing and reinforcing the experience that girls are having. I am curious. I know you said you were holding a lot of secrets. Was there a moment that you can recall where you were like, okay, I need to share this. I need to share these themes that I'm seeing amongst parents and caregivers. I need to share and write this book.
Yeah, for sure. And you can kind of see from the chapter titles, they're all that one word, like they're all the struggles they face, but I believe we all face. And they all help decide on what the chapter titles were. But perfection, people pleasing, self-doubt, those were things that come up in such a big way, where it's girls feeling pressure, so much pressure to be perfect and to be likable. And that permeates their experience in so many different ways, whether it's what they're wearing or who their friends are or how they're doing in school. And I can unpack that a bit and how we can create a healthier environment for them to just be their authentic self in the world. And then there's a sexuality chapter, which I would say was probably the biggest thing. I was invited into the rare space where I was the only person talking to them about sex education stuff. And I would say a two-prong. One is gender-based violence issues, which they were telling me stories. I was like, I have to do something about this in the world. My own personal philanthropic and activism has a lot to do with ending gender-based violence, and just discrimination, harassment. And I think people don't realize how much it permeates their world, and not to create fear. I'm actually not creating fear around that, because by the girls giving voice to it and having it acknowledged and having someone to talk about it, they felt less crazy. They were like, oh, okay, people do care. Like, we got to do something about this. Like, they are actually very solution oriented, and that's where we're underestimating them. They have so much power to be part of the solution. But a lot of what I found was so much fear being put on them. And so much, they're a victim. They're a victim to social media. They're a victim to all these things. Mean girls, and so on. And the girls are not empowered by fear and victimhood. And when I would actually ask them, what do you think the solution is? How do you want to handle this? What do you need right now? And I'd ask them those things. They came up with the best ideas and developed a sense of agency in their own world. That is what excited me also. And I was like, that's what the world also needs to read about them.
Yeah, your solution, it seems like throughout the book, is to ask questions. Right. And that's a tool for us as parents and caregivers, is if we're faced with something, you suggest asking them what their experience is, or I think you say it many, many times, like, how can I support you in this?
Yeah. That and run with it.
Yes.
Ask anyone in your life how I can support you in this, rather than, so often it's hard to see someone in pain and discomforts, particularly your daughter, right? Like she's in a lot of pain.
It's the worst.
And so, of course, I completely understand wanting to jump in and fix that pain for them and put slap positivity on it or just do whatever to get them out of pain. But what I have really learned, if I can share anything, is actually approaching that space with a genuine curiosity.
Yes.
Like that question, with no agenda, just meeting them where they're at with love, and then affirming and just saying, hey, yeah, that sucks. You know, the girls and their big feelings, which I'm sure many of you are aware of in this room. The time
No.
I have spent, rather than judging their big feelings, which is very much what the world does. We're all like, oh, teenage girl, you're in for it. Oh, you know.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, oh my gosh, that sucks. Yeah, I would be frustrated too. And then that's it. And then she's just like, thanks. Yeah. What I see is her relax and her be like, oh, thanks. No one understood, you know, just her needing to have a moment for that. Right. And then instead of me jumping in with the solution, I'd be like, well, what do you think's best? How would you like to handle it? Do you want to do something about it? Do you want to just vent to me? And I phrase it as a question and give her the ability to frame the time, that processing time with her. And lots of times she comes with great solutions. Lots of times you'll hear I don't know, right? Everyone's always like, well, I ask her and she says, I don't know. I'm fine with that. I think that when a girl says, I don't know, I love to respond with, okay, great. Well, you know what? I'm going to give you some time to think about it. Like, I have a feeling you're going to come up with some really good ideas. I can't wait to hear your smart ideas on this. Like, I'll check back in with you later about it and see if you've had any new thoughts. Because it's showing that I respect and trust her to trust herself to come up with good ideas.
Also, the power of saying, I don't know, even as a grown-up, to say, I don't know, and not fill the space with what you think you're supposed to say, you know, contributing to the perfectionism.
Right. Exactly. Like we have to have it all figured out. We have to put on a show. There's a lot of performative aspects to not just girlhood, but womanhood too, where we have to make sure we have it all figured out and everyone is happy around us and taken care of. And to hold space for more of that gray space of not having it, you know, her, I don't know. And then what it creates too is a mechanism for her to check in with herself, like say, hey, well, actually check in. What do I need right now?
What do I feel?
Yeah, like she may not know, but at least she's doing the action of checking in and saying, what do I need? Okay, I need some space, or I need someone to talk to, or I need to hang out with a friend, or I need just to listen to music, or whatever it might be. The fact that she's even doing that and developing that muscle is, again, helping empower her to go into adulthood in a brand new way.
In addition to asking questions, one of the things that you say that hit home for me was the mother martyrdom thing, because I have 3 kids. My husband travels a lot. I also work. And my experience of women in the home is that, you know, we're the ones that remember about cutting nails and doctor's appointments and all the unpaid labor that you refer to. And there's a societal reinforcement of that behavior. There is a feeling like if we're not doing it, it's going to get dropped. Yeah. And the impact that has on our kids who are witnessing that. Do you have any suggestions about fighting against that mother martyrdom?
So so many of these wounds of people pleasing, perfectionism, why I'm also excited about this book. The feedback I'm getting is that so many of these types of patterns are set up during our teenage years.
Yep.
And then we carry them into womanhood. And I'm excited about this space of what if we actually we move upstream and we didn't have to unpack all this baggage in our 40s in therapy. And what if we actually gave permission girls to really acknowledge their own needs and not self-sacrifice for everyone around them at an earlier age. That would be so exciting to me. And adult women who are reading it now are having this experience where they come in wanting tools on how to connect with their daughter, which they will totally get. And the main feedback has been like, oh, I didn't realize how it was going to be about me and my wounds and like dealing with the things I dealt with, because we hand down these patterns. And so I always say, like, the best thing you can do is the one thing in your control, which is focus on your own healing. And when we get triggered by a daughter or a girl's reaction, it's usually our own wound that's being poked at and triggered. And we then project, this is what I've seen, is we project our story, many, many stories we have going on in our head. We project that story onto the girl, and the girl's like, well, that's not my story, right? Like, you don't even know me, you don't see me. And that's where they feel so misunderstood. And it's not that your story is not wrong, is wrong and not valid. Like adult women have gone through a lot, and we're trying to protect them, right? We're trying to teach them so they don't go through the same pain we did. But what's happening is we just kind of create the same pattern and the same cycle. And I would say Gen Z in particular is a real cycle breaker generation.
They are.
And they're very much into mental health, psychology. I get to approach a lot of things. You'll see a lot of that in this book, just different type of kind of mental health approaches that the kids love. They love learning about psychology. So I always say, that martyrdom, right? It's really, we got to do our own work to find the root causes of why we set up and, where that comes from. Why do we feel that we need to, why can't we prioritize ourselves to make ourselves happy and healthy first? And I do the analogy, the classic, like put on your own oxygen mask on the plane, put on your own, they always say, put on yours before you put on the child, right? I'm sure we've all heard the analogy, but I really lean into it in the book where I'm like, you're going to die if you don't put on your oxygen
and then
mask.
You're not going to help anyone.
And then, exactly. Yeah. But what I see, it's more subtle. It's resentment, it's exhaustion, and shows up, and then that funnels into your kids' lives, which you don't want. And then we teach the girl to do the same, and it's all very subtle and sneaky, in my opinion.
It's so baked in. I have 2 boys and a girl, and it really is baked into our society. And I've had to catch myself many times being almost more concerned with her kindness and warmth and caretaking to other people than my sons. And you talk a lot about that too. And I just love that this book reminds us that mistakes are good. Like making mistakes and not being perfect, that's actually where the good stuff is. Like that's where we learn. And I'm just curious about what mistakes came up in your interviews with girls that you saw just shut them down, and then how did you talk to them?
Well, and to talk about raising boys and girls, I'm sure people have boys in this room, and you may have a different experience, but I've worked a lot with boys too, and I found when they make mistakes, it's really not a big deal. They're just like, oh, it's not. They have so much more permission to be messy, make mistakes, because they don't absorb it into their core identity. A girl makes a mistake. I mean, she does badly on a test, and it's devastating for her. Like she's all of a sudden terrible at math. She's that is not her thing anymore, And it really goes into their identity in a way that I don't see with boys.
Yeah.
And so back to that pressure to be perfect and likable, and but instead, I love reframing mistakes or flaws I talk about in the perfection chapter, where I had a girl where when she would try to write an essay, her brain would get all mixed up, and it was.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, and she would get so mad at herself because she couldn't get a fluid sentence out, and she was bad, and she's bad at English, and it was just so many bad narratives and stories we tell in our head. And I asked her, I slowed it down. I was like, tell me what it's like inside your head when you're trying to form that sentence. And she started describing it more. And I was like, what would you call it? What would you name it? And she's like, it's like a swirl. And I'm like, ooh, cool, a swirl, So I started bringing all this positivity to her thing, like how she does it, rather than trying to make her do it the way everyone else does it and stuff. I instead leaned into who she is. And so we started talking about the swirl and adapting to it. And we came up with a different way to outline her essay that flowed with her swirl. And I was like, let's call it the Nina swirl, and she started laughing, and all this levity and goodness came in around it. And she started seeing herself differently. She started seeing her process differently. This flaw, this mistake she does, right? And then she became so much better at writing. She found a whole new style of doing it her way, in a way that she felt empowered, and it was just instead leaning into that gray space where it's not binaries. Teenage girls love to think in binaries, black and white.
So do adults.
I'm good, bad, I'm perfect, I'm failure, all of it. And that embracing that gray space is the learning growth space that you're right, where it's all the good stuff.
Yeah. I think actually listening to your book, so my daughter hasn't gotten in a lot of trouble, but she got in trouble at school this year. And I feel like it was after we had listened to your book on that drive home. And she was called to the office, and it was a little bit of a misunderstanding, but it was big, and she had to face consequences for it. And I just felt like not attaching to the story personally and just asking her like, well, how did you feel about that? And then we did come around because of your book. It was like, gosh, if mistakes are inevitable, which is what you talk about. You're
We're
like,
all
mistakes
human.
are inevitable.
We're human beings. We're imperfect. We're going to make mistakes.
There's no avoiding them. And so if we can celebrate having them and the juice that we get from them, that's the best way to go. And she said something. I was like, it's pretty great. Like, you kind of like, this mistake happened. Good to get out of the way. And she's like, yeah. And now I can move on. Like, it was this, I was like, oh, I need that. I need a page from that book for myself.
I love it. And also when we give her the agency to make choices herself, there's a whole choice chapter.
Yes.
And yes, maybe we're sitting there being like, that's not the best choice.
Keeping my mouth shut
well.
because you told me to.
Yeah.
Yeah, like zipping it.
Zip it. Yeah. Zip it.
Zip
So
it.
harsh. But I don't actually say zip it.
No. But I hear zip it and then I zipped it.
But when she makes her own choice, even if it doesn't go well, it's her lesson to learn from, right? Like, instead, if we just tell her what to do and maybe that doesn't go well, she'll just like blame you and, well, you told me to do it anyway. There's no learning space. But when she does make her own choice, even if you were like over there being like, I don't know if that's the best choice, but she makes her own choice, it goes well. That is where self-trust, confidence, self-worth, that is where it all happens, right? Everyone's always like, how do I not have a chapter entitled confidence, right? That's what everyone wants from teenage girls. And I find that confidence is much more
a byproduct.
Yeah. There's the self-doubt chapter really leans into that. How do we deal with self-doubt? How do we develop self-trust, where she's checking in with herself saying, I had a good idea. My idea worked out. It was a good choice I made. That's where that happens. We
build self-esteem through esteemable acts like that. And you talk about reconnecting with the child, saying, hey, like what are their interests? We're asking them, what do they want to pursue? And then they get confidence as a byproduct of working on that stuff.
Well, so, and then that's very much in the identity chapter about authenticity and how much we put pressure. So I'll share another story so it has to do with people pleasing, perfection again, but also just how little
they all have to do with people pleasing and perfectionism.
Well, there was a 15-year-old girl, Marley, who was star volleyball player, made the varsity team as a freshman, and everyone was affirming her for being so good at volleyball. And her mom was a big volleyball player, so she was so proud of her. And she was so stressed out. She was getting migraines and stomach aches and headaches, all the pressure of the schedule and the club team. And I'm sure we all know the activity schedules of girls these days. And I decided one day to ask her, like, do you like playing volleyball? And she was like, she looked at me like, what? Like, no one had asked her, right?
Because her mother is a volleyball player, right?
Her mom was like so excited. But also when you're good at something as a girl, you get affirmed, and it becomes like your whole identity, the thing you do. Because girls are like, okay, well, I'm good at it. I must only do that apparently, right? Because this idea too that women and girls can be good at one thing and we need to own it. And so I asked her, do you like it? And she looked at me and was like, I like that I'm good at it. And I was like, okay, interesting. I was like, I get that you're good at it, but do you like it? Does it bring you joy to play it? And she's like, I like that, I can bond with my mom. And I was like, oh, wait, hold on. Are you playing volleyball to make everyone around you happy?
Yeah.
And she was like wide-eyed and was like, oh, that's not what she said. And then thankfully we brought her mom into the conversation and she ended up quitting volleyball. And not same conversation. I asked her, well, what does light you up? What does make you excited and happy when you just effortlessly spend time doing it? And she told me she was doing fashion sketches in the bus ride on the way to volleyball games. And I just made her so happy. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. There's a sewing class I know about on the weekends. Would you want to do that? And she was like, oh man, I love that. And so she ends up quitting volleyball and spending all her joy and time and energy switching into fashion and she becomes excellent at that too, right? We're always so worried, like, well, she's excellent at volleyball and that's going to help her get into college. And I always laugh because volleyball is actually not a career path. You know, she's not going to be a pro volleyball player. But actually, as much as I find that adults tend to dismiss teenage girls for their silly interest in fashion, right? There are so many jobs in the fashion industry. And I have now had many girls now in their 20s who have incredible jobs. Maybe they're not the prime designer, but they have an incredible job in the fashion industry. It makes them super happy. And that's about giving them space to actually explore their authenticity, what makes them happy, and it needs space to explore too. And they don't have to be good at it. I have one girl who loves doing art, and she wrote her whole college essay on doing things you're bad at and how bad she is at art and how she still does it. I was like, I love her, right, for that. And that's there's so much exploration of your identity in that space.
That's a big one. That's and it is in the perfectionism chapter too, of this idea of how paralyzing perfectionism can be. We won't even start something because we're afraid we won't be good at it in the beginning.
Right.
This book is filled with so many nuggets like this to be able to use and implement in our own lives. I am curious too, was there one you started to mention, but was there one chapter that you were like, oh my God, this is so hard. This is really, really hard to write.
Well, I would say the sexuality chapter, the radical honesty chapter, and the power chapter are very much my swan song that are more about systemic issues holding women back.
Yes.
That I think I'm very passionate about too. So those came out more easily, and just like how I want to change the world and how we could all be doing better to create a world that invites girls' voices.
I want to just make sure we get this in. Will you give headlines on like sex education in our system? Like give a couple of the bullet points.
And I did not expect to be pulled into the sex education space the way that I was, but I was the only adult they truly were feeling comfortable with. And a lot of moms come to me and say, oh, it's so awkward and hard to talk to my daughter about sex. And I always say, what about it is hard and uncomfortable for you? Go figure that out first. Like you have to go deal with your own wounds and baggage around sex and sexuality, because you will pass it down to your daughter. She will feel it. She will absorb the same stories and wounds. And so this is a space where I had to do my own work to be able to step into that in a healthy way and really meet her where she's at without judgment and listen to actually what her needs were without a secret agenda. And the huge thing that I see is just there's no space for her to explore because I dream of a world where we actually tell a girl that pleasure-focused sex education, right?
Yes.
I found, people are scared of the words STD and teen pregnancy and rape. Those are understandably scary, but I'm going to really go for it here. Honestly, the words that scare people are like orgasm, clitoris, pleasure, like there's no space. Yeah. And when whereas boys, we do permission societally and culturally, like to pursue pleasure and sex and so on. But girls, it's just nonstop fear. And then they feel that and they can't do anything right? Either their clothes are too slutty or they're super not in tune with anything, like completely terrified. And I'm saying this with love and compassion because I think all women really deal with this. And I would love to have a much bigger conversation. I'm just cracking the surface with that.
I 100% agree. And I want to be there for any and all conversations about this.
And the statistics are so bad. A lot of people don't realize, because we're in California, but only 18 states require that sex education be medically accurate.
and only 25 states teach it at all.
Teach it all. And it's predominantly abstinence only.
Yes.
And only 11 states teach consent, what consent is, require that consent be taught. So we're failing our boys too. Of course, they're really confused. Yeah. So, I'm all about education for the boys in this space in a big, big way too. So I am working on it. Like I'm actually trying to find my way in because it's pretty hard, these spaces. And you got to be brave. I'm pretty brave.
You are brave.
In that chapter.
And we're here to push you along.
Thank you. And then you were asking though about a hard chapter. I would say the beauty chapter was really hard to write. I had to find my own healing. A lot of the book, I had to heal my own inner teenage girl to write it. And that was what a beautiful full cycle thing is, understanding how much these girls taught me so I could heal myself too.
I think that's a lot of parenting too. You bump up against what you were given or what you weren't given, and it can be uncomfortable for sure. As far as how we can support this book, how we can like spread the word,
Wait, how are we on time?
We could just like you guys finish, wrap up, and we can definitely open it up to questions.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Everyone in here is going to have a question.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, let's do that. I was going to say one more thing too, which was making amends. And
Oh yeah.
I just feel like it's a really helpful tool for parents, which is, a lot of people are like already have a contentious dynamic potentially set up with their daughter. And it's like, how do we get out of these patterns? And I am all about asking for a restart. Like, hey, I got new information. I read this book. I'm going to try doing things a little differently. Like, so that's, and you may not trust it because it's going to be weird and different. So I'm just telling you, I'm asking for a restart. I'm going to approach it this way. I want you to believe that I'm really going to come with you with no judgment. And you can go read the book so you can see what I'm trying to try to do. And then you ask and invite the girl how you can make amends for any patterns you may have had. And you're the adult, right? As much as I'm sure the girl's done things that are hard too, and you would love her to apologize for it. We're the adult. And
what?
And the girls at the end of the book, I did not expect to write about it, but they said over and over again how much it would help them to feel like their parents said sorry for certain things. And it could be a simple day, not the people pleasing sorry, like sorry. I mean, like it could be big ones like, hey, we didn't handle the divorce very well. Like, is there anything you need from me that to make amends for this? And like, so we can start fresh in a better place with this. Or it could be small too, just like really owning and modeling for them, taking responsibility for stuff. But that is where I didn't expect to write about it, but the girls kept saying it. And you can see in the end of the book, I have quote after quote of the girls sharing how much it would mean to them and why. And it's liberating then. You get to have a much more free, honest connection and relationship with your kid.
It's really hard to apologize. It's
because as adults, we're taught that we need to have it all right, that we're there to teach the kid because we know everything. And the girls are so smart. They're so much smarter.
They know everything. Yeah. Unfortunately.
When they feel underestimated, when they feel like that you're not respecting their voice in the conversation, they're just going to shut you out anyway. So
I think so much of what we do as caregivers is a fear that they're going to get hurt. It is like we have to evaluate our intent versus our impact. Like I might intend not to hurt her. I might intend to prevent her from experiencing pain. That's my intent. But the impact of that is the thing I have to pay attention to. And you give so many tips on that.
Well, I'm excited to see what everyone's questions are. What do you got? I know the first one's always a little brave, right? Who has a question? Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much. This is amazing. And every time I go back to the girls, they're like, "Mom, what article did you read now?" It's a big joke, and then they follow what we say because they're like, "Mom, you probably saw it on Instagram or read a book about it." But my question is, I understand the mistake part. Conceptually, we need to let the kids have mistakes, right? I get that, but as a former people pleaser and reformed,
tell me how you did that.
I'm still working on it.
Okay.
But through books like this, to be honest with you, in this day of the cancel culture, when mistakes are a little bit more high stakes, or at least we see that with celebrities, or we see that in the media or things like that, how do we put our fear aside and allow them to make these mistakes? Like, it sounds like a great idea. And then in reality, it's like, what if they're canceled at school? Or what if they're blah, blah, blah?
Right. So, it's a great question. And I find that we dive into catastrophizing and extreme thinking so fast, and it builds up fear. And then all we do is they only get the fear. And it's actually back to that middle space because the catastrophizing extreme, oh my God, my daughter's gonna be canceled. Like that's a pretty binary thought. And when I say binary, it's like living in the extremes. And it's totally understandable. And I talk about worrying in there in the self-doubt chapter a lot, and fear. And worrying is really just perceived control.
Mm-hmm.
And when we just worry, we're like, oh, thinking of that scenario, we're wasting a ton of energy.
And it's a delusion. It's actually not even real.
Right. And I say, I feel like I'm a reformed worrier, if anything. I used to spend so much time and energy worrying. And when I actually instead consciously chose to think of the positive outcome of like, how can I empower this girl to make a smart choice on social media, or to like give all my energy, instead of worrying of all the things she could do wrong, I gave all this positivity to like building what she could do right. And we only have so much energy. I mean, moms are the busiest, right? You only have so much time and energy. And so I saw it as almost like a quantity, like how much was I expending on worrying in an extreme way versus how much time was I spending affirming this girl in front of me. And and their compliments chapter is all about giving techniques on how to affirm a girl in a way that truly helps her feel seen and heard and understood and valued and celebrated. Because when that starts happening, it's like what you said this to me yesterday, it's what you give energy to grows.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to give energy to constantly telling her like, don't make bad choices on social media, blah, 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 she's kind of going to be like, I'm going to make bad choices on social media. Like we basically told her that that's what she's going to do. Whereas instead I'm like, I get in there, ask questions. I say, well, what do you like about social media? What about it makes you feel like you connect? What about it doesn't feel good to you? Like, and I help her direct what's going to be best for her. So hopefully that answers some of it.
That's great. And I also tell them too, like, when I catch them, I'm like, oh, as a people pleaser, when I was younger, I never would have made that choice. And I really appreciate that you did that.
Yeah.
So I tell them all the stuff that I'm actually
That's
working
great.
through. Yeah,
that's
You're doing
good.
great.
Really great.
Yeah.
To tell them that like that's the stuff that I work on too.
I love
And
it.
then they love it.
Yeah, go for it.
How do you see the difference between Gen Z and the generation before?
Millennial or Gen X? Yeah.
Well, Gen X.
Yeah,
also,
Gen X is a whole nother world.
which is a whole thing I wanted to.
Yeah. So,
How are they that? I mean, I just don't understand Gen Z.
oh yeah. Okay. Well, then this book is for you. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I love Gen Z.
Yeah, me
They
too.
give me so much hope. And that there's a lot of hope in this book. You know, there's a lot of fear-based parenting type of book world out there. And
There's joy, optimism
Yeah.
in this book.
and
for
it's because
sure.
the wisdom and power of the girls, right? Like they want to make the world better, right?
Yeah.
Like they are growing up under the climate change world. Like they feel like they can make a difference. And I will say, actually, social media has empowered them to feel like they can make a difference and have a voice in the world. Yes, there are problems with social media, and we can talk about that if you want. But I'm just saying, the big difference for Gen Z is their access to a much bigger microphone platform, information. They are so much better educated on mental health stuff. I mean, the amount of kids that have told me about an infographic on like trauma responses that they learned about on social media, where they're like, oh my gosh, did you know freeze is a trauma response? And I was like, I love this. Let's dive into this. I didn't know.
How do you have time to talk about math when you're talking about this?
Well, it's also mentoring and volunteering my time, but or the girls will I had a girl bring up her mother wound with me. And I was like, I didn't learn about a mother wound until like 3 years ago in
that's
therapy.
awesome.
Right. And she's talking to me about it. And I was so excited because it was so healthy. It was so like, oh my gosh, if you're figuring this out at 16, and I had to wait until I was so much later. There's so much hope there.
Yeah.
Right? Of just them healing, understanding trauma, so Gen Z, I would say their access to information is really the key difference. And then social media, which it's a double-edged sword in many ways, and it's different from millennial. I see a lot of similarities. Millennial, a lot of people I would say Gen Z is a much more activist generation.
Agreed.
It seems like at the root of a lot of these issues is a girl's self-esteem.
Mhm.
And you've touched on some things already around that. But could you give more tips? Like
Yeah.
social things, how to help
Yeah.
build it?
I get the first step is giving space for her voice. And this is like my art form. It's like creating confidence and self-esteem in girls, right? So I really want to break it down because the first step I always say is listen, don't judge, and let her talk. Like actually, and the way you keep her talking is number 2 is phrase everything as a question. So you're like, okay, well, what do you think about that? I literally just the sentence, well, what do you think about that?
Mhm.
What do you think about
Tell
that?
me about that.
Like, what are your thoughts on that? And it could be anything. And the more she feels like her thoughts are valued and there's space for her to share her voice on it, and then that's it. It's not like a debate. It's not, well, let me tell you my ideas, and then affirm it. So the compliments chapter is probably the most potentially helpful in this space, where I say how you affirm them. You affirm with specificity. We do a lot of like, you're amazing. Oh my gosh, like kind of simplistic affirming. And the more specific it can be, so increase the length, the frequency, the enthusiasm behind her affirmations, like sourced real enthusiasm, but the specificity is leaning into a girl's weirdness. And I use the word weird instead of unique because that tends to be very achievement focused and perfection triggers, right? But in weird is where insecurities lie. Like we're all a little bit like, am I weird? And I find parents are always just so worried about their kid being normal. And I'm like, no, like actually normal isn't good,
What
healthy
is
and
normal?
good. Yeah, if
Yeah.
anything, it makes them constantly spinning on a cycle of trying to make everyone happy and the world saying they're good enough and okay. Like it's an external validation that's going to leave them feeling not enough. And then so when we lean into their weirdness, where I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, like, and I spot it and I affirm it and I say, I love how you're the one that's always coming up with the weird slang and da da da. You know, it could be anything, right? And then you see the girl being like, yeah, I do that. Like, yeah, okay, cool, I do that, right? And it doesn't have to be some big achievement thing. It can be like she comes up with weird slang, right? And she just starts feeling good about her unique, you know what? And I think all of us, a lot of the book is. I think being called weird is a great thing. And that is a space where there's so much potential.
The internal, external validation component of the book too. And it's how it's teaching them, hopefully, or modeling for them, because that it does become our own work, that we have to be our own best friend, you know, in this life.
Well, beauty, body image, self-image, where obviously so much self-confidence comes from, right? We haven't talked about that yet. Whew. If I could like have a beautiful ripple effect that happens with all the parents in this room right now, girls have told me over and over again how much a woman, an adult woman, talking about insulting her own body in front of her impacts them. Or just obsessiveness about their looks. Maybe it's not even insulting. It's just like, oh, well, I could be better. Like just any commentary you are doing in front of her about your looks, about your body, she hears it, she absorbs it, and she's going to do the exact same thing. And you are going to continue that pattern. And commenting on a girl's body, I would also say like that's
off limits.
101. Yeah. Like no matter what, I wouldn't comment on her body because it just never goes right, even if you think it's a compliment. And instead it's modeling, and it's modeling a behavior. And even if you don't feel it, even if you don't truly feel that body love,
fake it till you make it.
Yeah, the girls are good at detecting lies. Like you can share a vulnerability where you're like, this is hard for me, but this is what I'm trying to do, you know? But I mean, subtle things. I've had a lot of girls tell me how their mom dieted for 20 years straight and how this culture of dieting or just it being so normalized really impacted them. And eating disorders with girls is a huge, huge issue. So the more we can be mindful of our own relationship to our body and beauty, we'll have a huge impact. Oh, wait, she's had her hand up forever.
Okay, I just wanted a quick question. First of all, I love the weird thing in my house. We always say, if you're weird, you're not boring. And those are the kind of people that grow up that you want to sit next to at a dinner table.
Exactly.
Conversation, so I love that. Just a quick question. In your research with the girls, was it mostly neurotypical, or did you also have neurodiversity?
Yeah.
With some of the girls.
So
there's a range in.
Yeah, I was tutoring, and then I also started volunteering my time to mentor girls from underserved communities because it didn't sit right with me that I was only being paid to do this, and the nationwide, like so really expanded into like half the girl, and it was over 100 girls, and of really long-term relationships, not necessarily just an interview. It wasn't really like that. All a half identify as not white. And then, yes, I have a lot of girls that identify as neurodivergent. I wouldn't say it's like the whole thing, but I try to bring in their voice. One girl in particular who's very much, on the autism spectrum and so on. She brought in a lot of good commentary on the media chapter and beauty chapter of just, there was a lot of, in cool ways, rejection of the societal constraints and status quo. I actually loved their opinion on things that they were much more, could be really radically honest about how they don't fit in and how they have had to adapt in the best of ways. So even one of the girls, it's the whole not caring what people think and how their journey with that, I found it to be such a valuable addition to the book's message. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was like a huge spectrum, but I definitely over the years have worked with so many.
It's awesome.
I was curious if you could share, you touched on therapy, but what did you lean on in healing all of your wounds before you read the book? Or curious if you want to share.
No, I do. Well, I got to say too, it's been a revelation. I've learned so much about my own relationship to my own mom, and I I realized I had a lot of pressure on me to be perfect and likable because I thought if I was that, I would stabilize my environment. I would stabilize the people around me, my family, and whatever. We all have struggles within our family dynamics. And I found that the emotional burden is often on the daughter of a family to create, they're constantly attuning and trying to create emotional stability within a family. And I did that. And I saw it. I kept seeing it with the girls, them doing it and being like, "Whoa, that's not healthy. Wait, I did that," And then also not having space for my feelings. Like my mom was a power through. Like you power through that stuff. Like you don't feel. Why would you feel a feeling if it has no solution? Or there's no reason. Like why would you feel these bad feelings of frustration or disappointment when we can't fix it? So just power through it because then it'll go away, right? No, it is. Comes back up some way or another in your life, right? And so I learned a lot of having to honestly have space to cry out history of feelings that never got their moment. And then learning how to surround myself with people who could hold that space for me. Whereas my mom still really can't. And that's okay. Like I love and accept what she did. She gave me a lot of weirdness and quirkiness in the best ways. Like she did good things too. And just understanding the imperfection of people, and every parent is going to not be perfect, and having compassion for your parents. Is that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
I could really dig in, but
I know there's this is not enough time because there's so many things. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, I'm Sally, and it was just such an amazing conversation, both of you. Great questions, amazing. As I shared, I've been a fashion designer for over 30 years for this age group, for tweens and teens. And I can't wait to dive into your book. And for me, talking with them and designing for them and having that intimate relationship with them, I feel I really want your feedback because I'm also writing a book. And the biggest question always is about confidence and body image, as far as how do you feel an 11-year-old? How do you feel empowered when you don't feel confident? Like these big words, and especially with social media, like all of this, but they don't really truly, there's a lot of parroting, I guess. I mean, you see it on social media with all of the face stuff now and all the different things they want to put on their face. There's so much parroting and wanting to look like everyone else.
Well, how much time do we have? This is such a big question.
I know.
This should probably be the last question.
Okay.
We want you to have time to sign.
Yes, of course. Okay.
So I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And
So
get your feedback about,
Well, yes, there are so many harmful, tough things to navigate in this space, in the social media space. And if I can really say something, just a tool of sorts, it's the girl wants to be a part of the conversation. And lots of times we're doing a lot of just put your phone away, or you can't look at that. And what and what I've learned is if she feels respected, where I'm like, well, I will pull up a face-tuned, photoshopped image. I'm like, well, what do you think of this? What do you think she's pretty there? Do you think she's trying to get likes? Well, again, genuine curiosity. I'm not even trying to, if she says, I think she looks amazing, and I'm like, okay. I actually really try to accept what she says. And then I'm like, well, do you think that, that's her real body? Or do you think that's her face? And then they'll get it. They tend to be so smart with it. Honestly, they tend to be like, well, no, that's unreasonable. And they start picking it apart, and you start valuing their analysis of it. We're like, oh, that's a smart thought. I hadn't thought of it like that. Cool. Where she's like, oh, okay. I am good at evaluating. I love to activate their ability to detect what's healthy and what's not on social media, but it takes engagement. And I find they actually know how to pick apart social media better than adults, and adults are just have a fear lens on it, right? And I find the girls can be like, well, that's not good. That's, but start young, right? Start at these young ages so they can feel really smart and empowered with the choices that they're going to make. I have a lot of girls who have learned how to make healthy choices for themselves, where they put their phone away at night, or they feel like they're comparing themselves to the beauty narrative online too much, so they put the phone away. They talk to me about those things, but I've had to create a crazy safe, non-judgmental space for them to be able to admit that to me, right? Because if they're going to admit it to you, they think you're going to take away their phone and have all these bad consequences. They're like, you're going to freak out and be like, what? you feel like you're comparing yourself to body image to people. We should get rid of that. Yeah, exactly. And so they're just like, don't tell them anything. Keep this on lockdown. But I'm giving you hope. Like there's actually a lot of space for the girls to make smart decisions, and we got to not underestimate them, and we got to believe in their ability to do so. So that's a good note. And then I know, and I really appreciate everyone's support of getting the book. And please feel free to reach out to me, on Instagram or whether with more questions. And
yeah, I bet there are a lot more questions. I mean, even I have them. So I feel like I'm calling you on the way home.
And please share the book. Like it's such a good mom book club book. The way the chapters are structured, everyone's gonna have something to say about that chapter. And I say share. I'm not just like trying to sell my book up here. I have seen the impact now of like getting the feedback. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're making a difference collectively. Like women are powerful. We can help the girls. Like everyone's been so worried about teenage girl mental health and how they're doing and the anxiety. And I hear you. That's my book. Like, let's spread it and give it to people. It's a good gift. It's and then also when we post on social media and promote it, the girls actually feel so seen. They're like, oh my gosh, people care about me. They think I'm wise and powerful, and they feel empowered by seeing that. So, yeah.
Yes. It's we can't underestimate the power of this book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm hanging out. Yeah. Wait. Darn it, I missed it. I just wanted this whole scene, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're the bomb. Yeah, I'm all about like everything you said.
Yeah.